listeners to our latest edition of In the Hot Seat, a panel discussion focused on how technology is being used to solve today's problems. These panel discussions are part of ScanSource's Discover Opportunity initiative, and I'm pleased to be joined today with two of our industry experts from our suppliers who are going to help you, our partners, discover opportunities within your customer base. And today our focus is on the education space. This is one of four panels or panel discussions that we've recorded on the education space. Today, we're going to be focused on the future of hybrid learning. So joining me today to help lead that discussion, I have Bruce and Suzanne. So let's meet our panelists. Suzanne, if you can start and just let us know a little bit about yourself and your role.
My name is Suzanne Phillips, and I'm from the Cisco education team. It is my pleasure that I get to work with educators from around the world to understand what their needs are from technology and figure out how we can best help them.
Yep, great. And Bruce, same for you.
My name is Bruce Canal. I am the segment development manager for education with Access Communications. And I hail actually from a former end user world, and Access recruited me several years ago to come on board. So I bring the manufacturer perspective, but I also bring the perspective of being an end user for several years in the K-12 world.
Great. And you said, I keep calling it the green room, although we don't officially call it that. In pregame, you mentioned you've got kids and grandkids in the space too. So you're an end user and an end user of the education world. Yep. All right, great. So thank you too for joining us today. Suzanne, I'll pose the first question to you. Bruce, love to hear your comments on this too. We have talked a lot in these panel discussions about providing the highest quality experience for education for the students, given that they're not all on site anymore. Sometimes they're a hybrid learner, sometimes they're 100% distance learner, but all of the remote education sessions that these institutions are performing could be wrought with issues, technical issues. So we're all three of us clearly in the business of using technology to solve those types of problems. So Suzanne, again, starting with you, where are you seeing technology being used to improve that scholastic experience?
So first of all, hybrid learning, the best part about it is that it's truly powering a more inclusive future of education for all. Right now, we've had to turn to virtual learning on the drop of a hat, where we had to train up teachers and help them figure out how do we get students engaged. But now that we've learned from this experience, I think it's going to be really great to see what the future will bring as far as how can we continue to keep students engaged in the classroom. So by leveraging hybrid learning, we're able to keep students who may need to be at home still just as engaged as the students in the class. So a lot of what our goal at Cisco is to make sure that a student can have just as seamless of an experience, whether they're the one that's in person as in class. How can we figure out the way to organize the classroom environment with the right cameras in the right places and easy use of software that everyone can talk to everyone and the students at home don't feel isolated? As a backbone to all of that, it's been crucial to figure out how do we get the network up and running in order to support such an incredible use of bandwidth across devices in the school. As students return to school, for all of the individual devices they're going to bring back on campus that may not have been being used before. And then also how do we help get the right wireless access to students from home? So it's been a big time to lean on technology.
Yeah, I love you said engagement in there, which is has been one of our themes for sure throughout the panels we've been discussing. But distance learning is not new. There's continuing ed, there's adult education, there's a lot of these higher education institutions that have focused on providing adult education online, and so this concept of engagement for sure is critical, and it's a great place for technology to help step in. And then I love your comments about networking. We'll get into that, I think, here in a little bit, but we have talked a little bit about using or leveraging existing infrastructure to support all this new technology. So it's a very interesting time for our partners and us as trusted advisors to play that role to help. Bruce, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, Kyle, there are 2 points I want to make. I think are fair points to make. One is you're exactly right. Hybrid learning is really not new. There's a school here in Indiana. It's called the Indiana High School. I think it's been around for 5 years or 6 years, and it's a completely virtual learning high school. And then it's accredited. Students receive a diploma from the Indiana High School, completely online. But what has happened, and probably the critical nature of what we had in the e-learning space or the hybrid learning space, whatever term you want to call it, remote learning, this last, 12 or 13 months, is the newness to most of the school districts. It was really created for a lot of school districts, maybe as an experiment, but probably more e-learning was to cover those inclement weather days or a day when you had a water pipe burst in your school and it was closed for 3 days. Well, we can go to e-learning. But what happened was we all got thrust into this in the months of March and April. And now that, and it was clearly stated, now we're doing this forever. And it panicked teachers, it panicked students. And to Suzanne's point, engagement was the most difficult thing. I mean, keeping the kids interested. There are videotape. You can see of kids going, nodding off, on the screen. What do we do about that? Well, there's got to be ways to keep them more engaged, and that's the challenge. The technology we've got.
I think that's a good comment, because they say that you need to have a student doing something actively interactive with a teacher every 3 to 5 minutes. Otherwise, they'll be surfing. I mean, think about they're joining class from the most distracting devices in the entire world.
Yeah.
So how do we replace raise your hand if you have a question with different technical solutions? It's a matter of like finding those ticks and trips to keep students engaged.
Yep. And, as part of us preparing for a panel discussion, we obviously send you guys some questions ahead of time. And one of the most, I don't know, do we even bother asking the question out loud? Is this here to stay? Is K through 12 education through hybrid model here to stay? Bruce just said it. Suzanne, you're nodding your head. I think it's obvious that not only should we, but we can provide education through this method.
Let me throw one other twist to this. Remember, we've got millennials who are still not the senior decision makers yet. They're the assistant principals. They might be some principals, but they probably haven't evolved to the superintendent levels yet. When they move to that area, when they get to be 60 years old and they've lived their whole lives with technology, another maybe 5 to 7 to 10 years. And then you've got those students who've had a device in their hand ever since they were, a year old.
Yeah.
This is going to be seamless. It's going to be far easier. A lot of more smart people are going to get into to answer the engagement dilemma. And yes, it's here to stay.
I couldn't agree more. And Bruce, and my thing is just, I talk to so many schools who have unlocked new ways of learning because of hybrid learning, that why would we give that back? When we're talking about bringing in virtual experts from around the world, we're doing pen pal opportunities with classes halfway across the country or halfway across the world. And then you talk to students who are sick, who have had long-term illnesses that prevent them from going to class, now have the tools. And by investing in the video in the classrooms now, while it's still that hybrid environment where maybe half the students are home, it's going to pay off dividends in the future for those students who really need it, whether it be family or illness or other issues.
Those are great points. I give out verbal/virtual gold stars. No one has brought that up yet in any of our other panels. So I love the concept of being able to take the education and reach students who might not have had the opportunity to experience it in the old form factor. There's also an element to this too. I feel that's education as a business. School of choice or higher ed, they're trying to create unique value to get students to come to them, whatever the come to them means, either on campus or virtual learning. And Suzanne, your point about leveraging remote resources, high value educators, or the pen pal approach, that creates unique value to an education facility. Again, education as a business, to help them create a more appealing offer. So Bruce, I'm gonna come back to you. Just let's go back to the infrastructure conversation. So your business and our business has gone through multiple technology evolutions in the analog to IP world specifically, and a lot of this stuff leverages some similar infrastructure, although there needs to be technology improvements. But one of the things we wanted to talk about for sure was what type of technology investments are still yet to be made in order to support a true hybrid learning environment. What are you running into?
Well, I think what you're going to see, and what is really starting now on the horizon, is the quality of the video, is the quality of the technology. I mean, we have Zoom, we have Teams, we have WebEx, we have all the different brands out there, right? That a school district can choose. And of course, then there's a lot of proprietary platforms that, I don't even know some of the names where school districts use that help them get the word out and be able to communicate with their students. For me, I'm more on the security side. So a lot of times I don't get a chance to interface with the academic technology individuals, and vice versa. They don't work with me very often, but we do come together a lot when it talks about the camera and what we're using to make this work. So I think you're going to see more of that, and you're going to see even less resistance to the camera. I still experience a lot, Kyle, today with teachers who are concerned about being recorded in the classroom. Maybe they're being recorded in the classroom and there's some students who are still working remotely and they're concerned about that, but time is on our side. That's going to alleviate some of the anxiety and the stress that they feel, that they think that they're being watched, that their big brother is critiquing their work, when really we're just trying to make it easier for you to connect to every student that you've got, whether they're remote. Maybe it's half your students are there, half are not, or maybe it's because of illness. You've got a student that's home. That's where, kind of to Suzanne's point about geography, it's also about a student that has a broken limb and can't walk or, can't get around. So they decide to do remote learning, or maybe they're suffering from another illness and they're staying home. We don't want to lose connection with those kids. So, we still make connections remotely.
I've got, Suzanne's coming off mute here, I want to hear your comments too. I have a high schooler back there that suffers from the don't want tos. And unfortunately, the current K through 12 hybrid education environment allows a case of the don't want tos to still stay in their PJs and get an education. Certainly, this is much, much better use case for this for kids that are physically unable to participate. Suzanne, your thoughts on this too?
So I break it down into three main investment areas: one in the backbone of the connection, two in the security, and then three in that user experience. So when I'm thinking about how students need connection, if you look at internet access on a global basis, 3.7 million students still lack access to internet at home. Mm-hmm. So this hybrid environment is often going to supplement households who may not be in the top income areas and districts. So a lot of school systems are working to figure out, can they do something to close that digital divide? And can they somehow sponsor or use tools like Fluid Mesh that send Wi-Fi out to student homes to help get connected? Second, on the security portion, there is more students connecting on more devices than ever, and there's also more bad actors than ever. You can't watch the news these days without seeing a new pipeline or a new city or a new store that's been busted into, and students and education has been one of the top targets for these type of bad actors. So one of my top priorities, and as a school, if you're going to keep investing in hybrid learning, you have to have a plan so that nobody's bombing your meetings. Every class is locked. Only people who are affiliated with the school should be able to get in. And then third, in order for hybrid learning to stay, it's going to have to be a seamless experience for the educators. Because in this situation, we keep talking about, let's say you've got one kid with a really serious illness who needs to stay home. Beforehand, it's been, it's a lot of work to bring them in, just send home papers. So now that we've got the technology, we have to make sure that it's easy for the teachers so they keep saying, it's easy to include that one kid, like no extra strain on me, turn on the camera. So we're seeing, how can classes set up the best environment so that if I'm the teacher, I get to look forward directly at half of my students who are in person, and then look directly behind them to see the students on a grid view on a screen right above them with a camera pointed straight at me. So I, as a teacher, it's a simple experience. I get to say the same thing to both my students at the same time, and so that other students can walk back and engage with those virtual students too. So security, connection, and then an easy experience. I want it to stick around so badly that I'm
Yeah.
just so thankful to all our partners out there who are helping us get schools connected.
Yeah, we're the same way, and my background in my career has been in the communication space, which naturally has evolved into this UC and AV industry. And I take for granted, and you two are very well spoken in front of a camera. There's no nerves. I spend all day in front of a camera. Our educators don't necessarily. And Bruce, you just brought it up that there's going to be this comfort level, not only with is somebody monitoring me, but it's stressful. It's stressful to present in an environment, one that you know is going to be recorded. I can't stand watching myself on playback. Like that's a little insight into the Kyle psyche. But there's that new environment now that you're not just speaking to a known quantity of the 20 kids in front of you, that you're being recorded for posterity's sake, or it's being shared in different geographies. So yeah, this is a whole different environment, and it takes a different skill set to educate now than it did in years past.
It does. And I mean, if I could comment on that, like we have seen the need for professional development go up. And whenever we do surveys, it's the number one requested thing from our educators, that they say, help make this easy, make this make sense.
Yeah.
Right. And that's been one shocking thing in the pandemic. We spun up a bunch of, hey, how to get started with hybrid learning, lesson plans for your classroom, how to do a virtual field trip. And they had over 1 million views in the last start of the pandemic. So it's,
Wow.
the more that the partners, the more that all of us surrounding and supporting our educators can help and say, okay, let's look at best practices. Let's make this simple. What are the 3 bullets I need to use? Or how can I plan around, if what did group work used to look like in person? What can that look like in a hybrid environment? And how can we make it look fun?
The universities and colleges are certainly discussing this, how they're going to add this into their curriculum. I mean, this is going to be obviously a couple courses or 3 courses, one over their tenure as a college student before they get their education degree. It's got to be in there. I mean, we're going to have to teach you how to, and it's going to be a little bit of maybe practical, how you run the technology, not just how you engage, but probably some technical and practical on how to run the technology.
Yeah, I think your point earlier about the generational gap between administration staff, I think you're starting to see now that the generations that are coming up as our next gen educators are not only technology aware, but they require it. They have to have the technology. It's their normal experience at home. Why shouldn't it be at work, even though at work is as they're educating? Bruce, I definitely want to get your opinion on this before we wrap up. We talked a little bit in the opener just about, I called it ethics, but let's call it remote learning. We can turn it into a buzzword and call it identity management if you want to, but how do we know that the student is the student, especially in places where you have college prep classes, you have diplomas that you're earning either in high school or in higher education. If you have a distance learner, how do you know the quality of work is coming from the student that's supposed to be getting credit for it? And as we said in the opener, you said you've got kids, you got some opinions on this. I'd love to hear yours.
Well, first of all, let's also add those people seeking accreditation for certifications. Yep. They're doing a lot of this remote testing as well. They're not,
yep.
No longer do you go on their sites. Well, there's 2 things. Let's keep in mind. It is done differently. K-12 does it differently than higher ed. In K-12 initially, there was concern about cheating. Let's just throw it out there. That the students doing that, it's cheating, taking the test and looking at it. Most of the high school teachers have said, look, it's open book. But also remember, it's open book because we live in an open information world.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, yep. Now most math teachers allow you to have your smartphone right in your hand because, quite honestly, yes, we want to teach you how to do the formula. We want you to know that, but really the answer, just go get the answer. Knowing how to get there is really the question anymore. And that's the kind of stuff that you can't really cheat. So you're seeing some of the changing. My 2 granddaughters, I have 2 granddaughters, one that's a freshman, one that's a sophomore. They both admitted to me they saw maybe some cheating early on. Students who were actually what they thought were cheating. Now, and the one thing they had to be worried about is someone who's smarter than everyone else, feeding them the questions behind the camera. If I put my hand right here and I put it behind my camera, you can't see it. That's the only thing that they're really concerned about, because open book, let them read it. The thing is, everything is timed. They always told me it's a time question. So here it is, you're going to be given 40 minutes for this quiz. And you, quite frankly, don't have 40 minutes to answer the 30 questions if you're going to look it up page by page by page. Can't get it done. And teachers do that, intentionally. College level, vastly different, Kyle. They really put some requirements in place where, they will have you clean your desk. You'll make sure your door's locked, your monitor's covered that you're not using, television's covered if you have one in the room, your whiteboard's covered. They will have you turn your camera around and make sure that it's completely free of any chance that you're going to be cheating when you take this test. And the big thing is, it's the accountability. If you do violate it, you're going to be held accountable. Yeah,
I think you brought up a great example at the very beginning of that of proctored tests too, which is very relevant in our industries, right? And we've already evolved to that if you're taking the test at home, you do have to take your camera and show your work environment and all that kind of stuff before you can take the test. Suzanne, I think this parlays a little bit into the comment you just made about teachers having to have the right kind of plan put together for hybrid learning. I think this is an element of that, right?
I do. And I think I think that may be a positive thing to come from the hybrid learning is it's had to inspire many educators that I've talked to be a little bit more creative with their testing methods, because it's a lot easier to pass a note and research a question when it's a multiple choice or it's a quick fill in the blank. That's a lot easier to cheat than it is. I'm seeing more focus on less massive questions, smaller massive questions that are more critical thinking. So like essay questions, explain your work, online interviews where teachers are having that one-on-one conversation if it's a smaller class. So I think that may be a good thing to come out of this scenario.
Yep, I agree. So, well, we're going to wrap things up with this session. Really, really engaging session. I really appreciate you two treating this as we intended, as a conversation. Very engaging, and I hate it that I lose eyesight with the camera because I take notes. I took a half page of notes today. So thank you very much. Our partners, this was not for me, this was for you. If you didn't take a half page of notes and you want some follow-up and some assistance with helping discover opportunities within your education customer base, you have resources like Suzanne, like Bruce, like my team at ScanSource, and across of our supplier base. So please use us as your trusted advisors. Again, I've plugged the panels a couple of times. The In the Hot Seat panel discussions are one part of the content that we've created. You can find a lot more information on www.scansource.com/education program. So please check that out. Reach out to your ScanSource account manager, your supplier contacts, as Suzanne and Bruce are examples of, if you have any further questions. And with that, I will say thank you again, Suzanne from Cisco, Bruce from Axis, for joining me today. Thank you.